I hate horror. All types, be it literary, televisual, cinematic, or interactive. I am a giant scaredy cat, and just can't deal with that level of terror in my life. So the fact that I plucked up the courage to play a game that has zombies coming out of every orifice should tell you all you need to know about the quality of Telltale's breakout success. The Walking Dead Season 1. This game basically redefined the adventure game, and to some degree was the birthplace of purely narrative-driven, dialogue, choice-based modern video games. This was a game that removed a lot of the obscure puzzles that had plagued the genre and lent more on relationships between characters. Lee and Clementine are two of the most well-realized characters in modern video games, and the supporting cast like Kenny and his family built a tension within the group that meant you couldn't trust anybody. Each episode was unique unto itself, while building the overarching narrative of trying to get Clementine back to her parents. There were so many moments where there weren't clear-cut choices, and the decisions you had to make were so difficult. Although the narrative ended in the same place, the journey to get there was so distinct across different playthroughs because of the choices you made and the resulting repercussions. It's not often that video games make you cry out in shock at a character death or a narrative twist, but The Walking Dead constantly achieved such a reaction from me through a sense of investment in its characters and world. Even in 2019, it's worth playing to experience one of the most emotionally rich stories of the last generation.
When the higher hills have turned to blue.
If we're talking about games that Bally just wouldn't shut the hell up about, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze takes the crown, the kingdom, and the continent. I never really knew what he was nattering on about because I'd played Donkey Kong Country Returns on 3DS and thought it was a solid platformer, but not much more. Oh, how wrong I was. Tropical Freeze ranks among the best 2D platformers Nintendo has ever made. In my opinion, it surpasses every 2D Mario and then some. And the key to its success is context. Every level in Tropical Freeze makes sense. The platforms are grounded in the world and environment, giving us levels where an autumnal theme is enhanced by falling leaves that crumble and disintegrate as you jump on them. There's a whole world where each level progresses this idea of a factory, where fruit is chopped, turned into jelly, then finally frozen into ice lollies. Yes, the platforming is weighty and responsive, and the level design is brilliantly conceived and incredibly challenging, but none of this would stand out as much as it does without the excellent eye for detail and context for everything in the world. It does have some shortcomings, mainly in the realm of bosses, which, while creative and bombastic in equal measure, often fall into the trap of only having specific time windows in which you can damage them. This often results in very long fights that then have to be repeated again and again as you go through the phases that have now just become rote, just to get to the part that you were stuck at. But for my money, this is undoubtedly the best game Retro Studios have ever made. Tomb Raider is a series that I have a small amount of history with, having owned Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation when I was younger. However, I never thought the games were any good. I could hardly get anywhere when I played them, owing to wonky controls and a very steep difficulty when I was, quite frankly, a dexterously incompetent 9-year-old. In the intervening years, I played the Uncharted series and saw some of the aesthetic influence that Naughty Dog had taken from those old Tomb Raider games. And then, things came full circle when the series was rebooted in 2013, and we saw a game that was very much influenced by the Uncharted series itself. I have put both games together here because, though they are different in scope and story, they feel similar enough, and I like them equally enough to discuss the reboot as a whole. The thing that stands head and shoulders above the rest here are the tombs. I adore the environmental puzzle solving of this series, and there is never enough of it. The small, self-contained areas which are free of combat are among some of the most satisfying yet simple contextual puzzles out there. The series, though linear, is more exploration focused than its influences, and the combat is also a lot more varied, especially in the sequel. The characters and story are completely forgettable, but these games are fantastic action romps that I'll never tire of. Xenoblade games are like time vacuums for me. I disappear for a week and come out the other side having dumped 70 plus hours into them. Such was the case with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when it came out, as I had, within the span of about 6 days, just fully dissolved myself in it. There's such an ease of play when it comes to Monolith Soft games that makes them so hard to pull yourself away from. This game is distinctly more anime than its predecessors, and as a result it felt more tropey and less unique in many ways. Don't get me wrong, this world is still fascinating and filled with interesting ideas, but it doesn't fully land them. That said, the Titans and the Great Cloud Sea provide a wonderful variety of environments, and even now I can hear the bombastic Morardain theme thumping along in my head as I remember exploring its dusty landscapes. And the music really does deserve special mention. It is one of the most consistently excellent soundtracks I've ever heard, and themes like the haunting choral arrangements of the Inderline Praetorium are particular standouts. But the real star of the show is the combat system, which, for the first time in a Xenoblade game, made sense to me. So much so that I was dealing combos in the millions to the final few bosses, and felt incredible mastery of the systems by the end. It is complicated, but does unfold slowly enough for you to get to grips with it pretty easily. It may not have the most memorable characters, and the voice acting can definitely be rough, but it delivers in spades with so many other elements that it was impossible to put down. We may now live in an era where Metroidvania games are a dime a dozen, but back in 2013 when Guacamelee came out, there really wasn't much competition in the space, and Guacamelee certainly stood out. The luchador-themed adventure was so distinct in its style and really added a twist to the formula by building a pretty robust combat system with power-ups that also aided your platforming. I loved going through some of the endgame areas where you'd have to jump, then chain 3 or 4 special moves back to back to give yourself the momentum to get to otherwise unreachable areas. Multi-purpose design is one of my favourite things, so the fact that these various luchador wrestling moves could be used in both combat and traversal was firmly in my wheelhouse. I also didn't mind the meme-filled humour and thought that a lot of the writing was pretty charming and often got a chuckle out of me. They really put a lot of thought into the various combat arenas, and bosses were a particular high point of the game, with my main nemesis being Javier Jaguar, who gave me a fight for the ages. It was so challenging that it must have taken me over an hour to beat him. The Metroiding also leans more towards fusion, with it always being clear where you have to go next, and you have a map that obviously shows you colour-coded block doors that each relate to one of your unlockable wrestling moves. It may not stand out amongst a crowd today, but Guacamelee is really damn good. I first saw Soul Calibur II in a magazine and instantly knew I had to play it. I don't really remember why though. Maybe it was Necrid who looked really cool to an 11-year-old NBZ, or maybe it was the various weapons you could unlock, or maybe Link had something to do with it. I can't be sure, but I knew I needed this game. And boy did I make a good choice, because Soul Calibur is really the only traditional fighting series I like, and in many ways it isn't even one of those. It is a 3D fighter, which means you can rotate around your opponent as opposed to being locked to a 2D plane. This sidestepping was often how I would have to play against some of my friends who opted for characters like Kilik that I'd always have trouble against. I mainly played as Mitsurugi in his unlockable young outfit, but also loved characters like Talim and Xianghua. The unlockables in this game were off the charts, with Weapon Master Mode being the gem that the series has never quite recaptured. All the various weapons you could unlock were so much fun, especially in the case of Link, who was a walking reference machine, gaining access to a bug net, Big Goron sword, and the cane from Link to the Past. Weapon Master is still the best single player mode in any fighting game I've played, and gave me so much to do when friends weren't around. Beating Arcade Mode also gave you this great museum entry where you could hear voice lines and read history while rotating a 3D model of the character. It really gave me motivation to complete everybody's story. There was so much to Soul Calibur 2, and though there have been 4 games since, they really haven't topped it yet. Boxboy is maybe one of the most simple looking video games that has come out in the past 15 years. It is also one of the most clever. Having such a clean art style allows for a slickness in design that I've rarely seen puzzle games achieve. I often describe Boxboy as, what if Tetris was a platformer? And I think that's one of the most apt ways to put it. You can produce boxes from all over your body to create platforms. You can hook yourself onto ledges, build staircases, or defeat enemies. Rarely do I see a single mechanic like this pushed to its absolute limit, yet Boxboy does it so effortlessly. Similar to the modern 3D Mario games, the real challenge isn't merely getting to the end, but instead getting the tricky crowns along the way, which impose strict box limits on you. I found myself doing quote-unquote advanced techniques, like pushing out boxes to move an object, then absorbing them back into myself because, unless you stop holding the button, they won't be counted among your total. There is a staggering amount of complexity to this series, and each new entry adds another wrinkle, whether it be 2 boxes at once, or various gimmick boxes like one with a rocket jet attached to the base of it. I played the first game endlessly, and pretty much 100%ed the thing, and though I never had the compulsion to do the same with the sequels, I always took the excuse to jump back in for more puzzles, just because they were so damn satisfying. Please don't be deceived by the simple look of this series, because what lies underneath the surface is one of the smartest series Nintendo has produced in years. Hollow Knight is probably the closest you'll get to seeing a Dark Souls style game on this list, and that's for one simple reason. Because it is simultaneously a 2D Metroidvania and a punishing action-adventure game. Well, of course it's on this list for more than that, but at its core Hollow Knight seamlessly blends incredibly challenging combat with the dark and lonely mystery of discovering an unknown world, something Metroid games are so well known for. It has such a darkly cartoonish aesthetic, which is fantastic as it allows me to deal with themes of the horror genre without being scared shitless. Hollow Knight evokes that sense of dread and fear in a way that I can engage with. But at its core, this is really a game about getting lost. It's a game about delving into the unknown and learning your way through the environment. It's about running for your life as you try to get to the nearest bench so you can safely map out the area you've just explored. And it's the variety of enemies and bosses in this game that will be making you run for your life. Fights are a synthesis of pattern recognition and dexterity, whilst also learning when it's safe to heal. This balance between rewarding the player with the opportunity to heal by being aggressive against enemies is such a fine one to tread, but Team Cherry achieves it expertly. There is an unmistakable craft to this game down to the animation of random bushes in the world that you slash at as you pass by. It is truly a modern classic that will go down with Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night as a giant of the genre. Swinging in Spider-Man is fucking perfect. It is sublime. I don't think movement in a video game has ever felt this good. Launching yourself off rooftops, running on walls, spinning and tricking in the air. All of this contributes to an exceptional feeling, and New York is the perfect playground for it. The skyscrapers that line the environment almost feel custom built for this particular superhero, which is why I suppose he was put in New York in the first place. And I think the ease with which anyone can pick up the controller and swing in this game contributes to the character of Peter Parker that they want to portray. He's an experienced Spider-Man, a veteran at this point who can swing as effortlessly as he can breathe. Hell, the only reason I opened up the map and collected all the goddamn backpacks was because I wanted an excuse to just keep swinging around. That said, another reason those backpacks work is that they give us a history and a context for this version of Spider-Man. Look at me caring about a superhero story, and in a video game no less. But this game is so surprisingly well written, and the characters so well acted that I was instantly invested. It's without a doubt one of the best superhero narratives I've experienced, and having seen the majority of the MCU, I would likely rank this story above most of those movies. There are some fantastic set pieces and some really well-earned character moments. Though it does become repetitive by the end, the combat is incredibly fluid and a lot more challenging than you may expect. I do wish they'd forced me to use some of the cool gadgets because I never ended up needing to. But hey, that really is a minor annoyance in a game that is otherwise pretty immaculate. Oh boy, time to turn off the comment section for this one. I get it, the internet hates Final Fantasy XIII, and I certainly understand why. It's a game that really says goodbye to what the series was all about. It's as linear as an RPG can get, and when you compare it to games like Final Fantasy IV, you see that not much DNA is shared between the two. However, this was my first Final Fantasy, and one of the first HD games I'd ever played. I was blown away by how good it looked, by the voice acting and story, nonsensical as it may be. I've since realised that, yeah, it's not great in that department, but I still think that the environments are gorgeous, and despite being on a linear track, you can still admire this world from a distance. But Final Fantasy XIII, similar to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, really shines when it comes to taking on enemies. Each of your characters has a set of roles that they can play in combat, be it Medic, Sentinel, Ravager, etc. These roles create what the game calls paradigms, a grouping of roles that allows you to achieve different things in battle. The fights are so fast paced that you will often choose the auto battle option, and though it's very easy in the early goings, once things expand it becomes so fast paced that you're non-stop switching paradigms to fit each scenario. The stagger gauge is what makes this interesting, as similar to another Square Enix RPG, Octopath Traveler, you can't really do much damage until you've broken the enemy's defenses down. This is why it's important to use the Ravager role to build the gauge, and then dish out damage as a commando once it's staggered. There were so many nail-biting fights in this game, and I always came out the other side wanting more. It may be universally reviled, but I still love this game, and nothing you say will change my mind.